everybody, welcome to The World This Week. The wave of stabbings by Palestinians in Israel reaches a new peak. Syria's Assad launches a new offensive with the help of Russia and Iran. An easy win for Hillary Clinton in the Democratic debate. And Donald Trump still leads in all the polls. These are some of the issues we'll touch upon this Sunday. This Sunday are Charles Biblizer of I-24 News. Hi, Charles. Tal Shalev of I-24 News. Hi, this is President Obama on the latest wave of violence in the Middle East.
We condemn in the strongest possible terms violence directed against innocent people and believe that Israel has a right to maintain basic law and order and protect its citizens from knife attacks and violence on the streets. We also believe that it's important for both Prime Minister Netanyahu and Israeli elected officials and President Abbas and other people in positions of power to try to tamp down rhetoric that may feed violence.
Tal, this is perceived in Israel by many in Israel as too little too late.
Well, these Obama and Netanyahu, these two always know how to get into a row. Whenever the time is sensitive, you can place a bet on the fact that Netanyahu and Obama will disagree. Obama weighs in on this conflict only after more than 2 weeks that it has been going on. So in the past few days, he has been following up on the Secretary Kerry's attempts to try and mediate between Netanyahu and Abbas. He will be meeting with Netanyahu later this week. But Obama, as we see, isn't very interested. He thinks Kerry can do his thing, but he will not be putting any political capital on this, as we can hear from his statement that is quite balancing between the two sides. The core of this topic, the core disagreement between Netanyahu and Obama is actually on the Palestinian issue, and this has been the core disagreement since 2009, since the two started to work together. And while Netanyahu has convinced the Israeli public that the latest wave of terror doesn't have any connection with the Palestinian frustration from the Israeli settlement policy, Obama disagrees, and he doesn't have much faith in Netanyahu. So we can see him quite indifferent, and that is why it took him so long to actually respond to this latest wave of violence.
Yeah, maybe some frustration in the background there, Charles. We've tried, we've been here for a year, Kerry was here shuttling back and forth, nothing happened. Well, now it's your problem, something like that, right?
To a degree, yeah, but it looks as though the U.S. is still engaged in the process. Kerry is going to be meeting with Netanyahu at some point this week in Berlin. That being said, when you look at the backdrop of the Middle East in general, it seems as though everything this U.S. administration has touched has turned to fire, whether it be Libya following the NATO, essentially U.S.-led intervention, whether in Syria, when Assad crossed Obama's red line, they did nothing, in Iraq after the U.S. Withdrawal, even Egypt is fighting an Islamist insurgency now after Obama backed Mubarak's downfall. So this is just, in my opinion, another effect from Obama's overall Middle East policy, what we're seeing in Israel.
Yeah. But that being said, we should point out that in this case, both the leaders, both Netanyahu and Abbas, have been playing an ambivalent game. Both of them say different things to their own people and different things to the international community. So in that respect, I do think that there is some responsibility for the Israeli and Palestinian leaders.
You've mentioned Syria. There's an attack there now by Assad's army, with the backing of Russian Air Force and Iranian soldiers. Who would believe that?
About 1 month ago, it was inconceivable, especially with Russia having been so isolated by the international community after its escapades in eastern Ukraine and annexation of Crimea. We're hearing that there are thousands of Iranian troops involved, Hezbollah boots on the ground as well. Under Russian air cover, the Syrian regime advancing towards Aleppo, which is still Syria's largest city with about 2 million people still remaining. If Assad were to be able to take control of this area, it would really act as a major buffer zone to his very powerful, to his coastal Alawite region, which is already very secure. Listen, Putin has entered the foray, and it's become quite clear that in addition to striking the odd Islamic State target, he wants to beef up Assad.
Now, back to Israel and the Palestinians. Internally in Israel, typically when there's an attack like this, politically everybody's sort of rallying around the prime minister. But is there any other forces in Israeli politics that may push towards any negotiations with the Palestinians?
Well, at the moment, it doesn't seem that way. The center-left parties, the Zionist Union and Yesh Atid, who were supposed to be the ones pushing to renew diplomacy, are talking about Abbas basically in the same terms that the government is talking about him. So nobody really considers Abbas a real feasible partner at this point. Interesting enough, Netanyahu is having a lot of political problems, not with his opposition, but within his own camp. We hear statements and details from cabinet meetings leaked on a daily basis. And so Netanyahu is dealing with a lot of political pressure, but from people who are supposed to be supporting him. And he's also constantly being challenged by his opponents on the right, Naftali Bennett and Avigdor Lieberman, all of the time pointing out that Netanyahu isn't doing enough and that a much tougher hand is needed in this conflict.
Tal and Charles, I thank you very much.
Thank you.
A lot has been happening in Jerusalem this week. With us now from Jerusalem is Liz Doucette, BBC's chief international correspondent. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be on your program.
You've been covering the Middle East intensively, recently in Syria. What's your take on what's happening in Jerusalem now?
The wars are very, very different, and you would know that better than I do. I've been coming to Jerusalem for the last 20 years. I lived in Jerusalem for 5 years, and that was just after the Oslo peace process, where there was much more hope that the two peoples, Israelis and Palestinians, could live side by side, and that there would eventually be a peace process that would end in peace. And look where the situation is now 20 years on, no closer to peace, and in fact not even very much of a process. It's very sad to have to come back to continue to report on continuing violence, continuing claim and counterclaim, and you see now the new generation, young generation of Israelis and Palestinians who basically just want a normal life. They want to get on with their education, get on with what people elsewhere around the world have, and so the situation here is very protracted, and it's an international process in which the leaders in many capitals have been engaged for a very, very long time, and Israelis and Palestinians, most of all, because it comes down to them in the end, have been struggling to deal with. Syria is a new war, and it's a very destructive war. We would never wish for that to happen anywhere else, and we never wished it would happen in Syria, because Syria now is being torn apart. And gratefully, that's not happening here, but the tensions here are also very serious and significant.
Can the world media grasp the complexities of Jerusalem?
Well, world media have always covered the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. When I was here in the 1990s, it was the main story. It was in and out of the headlines, unfortunately, for all the wrong reasons, for what was then the second, well, after that was the second Intifada, but a wave of suicide bombings, the efforts of the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin. There were so many stories that just kept going on and on. There were some happy stories too. Gratefully, I was very glad to be able to cover other stories here, both among Israelis and among Palestinians and among both peoples together. The interest here for the media went away a bit when we had the so-called Arab Spring, when attention focused on the war in Iraq, the war in Syria. But as it's often been said, this still remains a fundamental issue, if not a core issue, in the Middle East. So people, sadly, will keep coming back again and again to cover an unresolved conflict.
Seems that there's no international effort this time, not even from the U.S.
Well, look at Secretary of State John Kerry. More than a year ago, he went back and forth trying to get Israeli and Palestinian leaders to the negotiating table. It took many months and many visits. They finally went around the table again. That collapsed after months. And now, yet again, John Kerry says he's coming to the region. The United States, as Israel's most important strategic partner, also a partner of the Palestinians, constantly comes in and out of engagement, but always does keep a very close eye. Europe does as well. The international community's interest will never go away because, as I mentioned, it still is a fundamental unresolved issues. And from this unresolved issues, many other unresolved issues, unfortunately, feed upon it.
Yeah, well, in Syria, we're seeing hundreds of thousands of casualties. This is an entirely different proportion.
It's never just a question of numbers. People know that here. Just tallying up the numbers doesn't really, the arithmetic is not what it's about. There's far more complex realities. And I would never try to sit down and compare what's happening in Syria with what is happening here. Two very different different situations, two very different histories, and two very different realities on the ground. What matters here is that it has been going on for far too long in the minds of many people. And what would be much better is to be able to come here and to say that this is over, and Israelis and Palestinians both can move on to other parts of their lives.
Did you figure out for yourself what are the main mistakes on both sides here?
Well, that's not for me to say. The question of what is a mistake is in the eyes of those who commit the mistake and those who have suffered from the so-called mistake. I think that is for Israelis and Palestinians to say. I always remember what Hemi Shalev, the Israeli journalist, said a long time ago. He said, we're not promising 100% success, but we are promising 100% effort. And I think what we haven't seen is 100% effort and certainly not 100% success.
Liz Doucette, BBC's chief international correspondent, thank you very much.
Very good to talk to you.
Let's catch up on the presidential campaign and first, the Democratic debate.
Just for the record, are you a progressive or are you a moderate?
I'm a progressive, but I'm a progressive who likes to get things done. And I know how to find common ground, and I know how to stand my ground, and I have proved that in every position that I've had.
We say hello to Danielle Ziri, I-24 correspondent in New York.
Hi, Jacob.
Well, Hillary Clinton could not afford but to win this debate.
Yeah, she had no choice really because, you know, in the past few weeks, she has been going down in the polls and sort of plummeting. One of the biggest problems with that is her scandal, the email scandal that has had an effect on her polling numbers. And of course, also the fact that people said they find her a little too boring, a little too old, not likable enough, not down to earth enough, maybe too official. And she has been trying to change that image over the past couple of weeks. She's been going on comedy shows like SNL and Jimmy Fallon and The Ellen Show, and so really trying to change that image. And in every one of those occasions, she really downplayed that email scandal to really make it seem like nothing. So she really needed to do a good job on this debate. And according to the numbers, the day after the debate, she actually did pretty well. You know, 56% of the members of her Democratic Party said that they thought she won. She was very sharply spoken about a lot of issues. She was responding very well to people confronting her about her changing positions over certain subjects, and you know, she definitely, you could see she definitely had more experience than the other candidates.
Yeah. Well, many say that Bernie Sanders was too soft on her and actually handed her the biggest prize.
Well, yes and no. You know, if you look at the social media, you could say Bernie Sanders actually won the debate because he got the most mentions on social media. He was way more popular among a younger crowd. But for sure, a lot of people said, and this is including Donald Trump, who reacted to the debate afterwards, said they weren't tough enough. Neither Bernie Sanders or the other candidates were not tough enough on the front runner. And for sure, coming to her defense on the emails and asking everybody to stop talking about the email scandal, that might not have been his smartest move if he wanted to rise to the top for this debate. But he did say later that it was a spontaneous move, so I guess it wasn't very calculated. It would probably not have been the decision of his campaign managers.
Yeah, well, let's watch this moment.
But I think the Secretary is right. And that is that the American people are sick and tired of hearing about your damn emails.
Thank you. Me too. Me too.
You know?
And Danielle, what's going on with Joe Biden, the candidate that wasn't there?
That is a very good question, Jacob. Nobody knows. Actually, at the debate in Las Vegas, they had prepared a podium just in case the vice president would want to come and debate with the other candidates. That didn't happen. And, you know, he's been doing really well in the polls, even though he does not, announce his candidacy. I can tell you that 49% of American people, in fact, say that they have positive views about Joe Biden and they find him likable. He's actually ranking much better than the other candidates of the Democratic Party. Some people say that perhaps him running is a decision that would be based on how well Hillary Clinton would do, and if she wouldn't do so good, then he would come in and run to win in her place. some people say that after this debate, she did pretty well, so that option might be off the table, but he still has until the end of the month to decide. So technically, you know, anything can happen.
Yeah. Well, on the Republican side, nothing much happens. It's still all about Donald Trump.
It's always about Trump, and you know, if I must say, Donald Trump actually makes the news. You know, Jacob, every time he opens his mouth, it makes a headline, it starts a debate, and this time he touched upon another quite taboo subject, 9/11. And in an interview with Bloomberg, he actually said that he blames Bush for 9/11. He said, you know, I don't want to say anything, but 9/11 happened under Bush. So implying that Bush is to blame for the attacks. You have to know this is a subject that is very taboo among Republicans and definitely off limits for Democrats. So he seems to have opened another Pandora box, and this is what Donald Trump does best. So we'll see what the next one will be. I'm sure we'll see it very soon.
I'm sure too. Thank you very much, Daniel Ziri, I-24 correspondent in New York. And this has been The World This Week. We'll see you here next Sunday. Have a great week.